Today we'll be speaking to Rupak, who is currently an urban planner. So Rupak, could you give us a brief of your career?
Right. I was originally an architect, and urban planning is a specialization. So you would do a specialization after architecture, or even in many other fields allow you to do urban planning. And urban planning is just looking at cities or parts thereof. Uh, Approaching it from the side of from the angle of architecture is interesting, because in architecture you look at the building blocks of cities, which are buildings, right? Be it residential, commercial, recreational, you're still looking at building blocks. But when you look at a larger part of the city, like a district, neighborhood, community, that's an urban planner's job. And even zooming out, when you look at cities, regions, that's also an urban planner. So urban planner, a lot more is involved in urban planning than architecture. When you are an architect, you're dealing with, let's say, structures, the building utilities, and a bit of landscape, right? But when you're an urban planner, you're dealing with economics, you're dealing with transport, you're dealing with infrastructure, which is wet and dry utilities. Wet is the wet pipes, let's say, network. Dry is electricity. And you're dealing with all those networks, and you bringing all the professions together to create a plan for a government or a developer. So that's urban planning.
Yeah, it sounds quite interesting with a combination of various topics and subjects. So how exactly does one become an urban planner?
Right. Although the traditional Indian approach is to go into urban planning as an architect or a planner. So there's a Bachelor of Architecture, Bachelor of Planning, and then you would do urban planning. But if you look at international programs on urban planning, you would have a vast majority of students coming from non-planning background, like geography, statistics, policy, because a lot of the urban planning then becomes government initiated policy, right? So you're looking at populations, demographics, how the populations move around, how the populations grow, depending on the industry. So there's a lot of subjects, not just drawing a parcel with your finger and doodling, but there's lot many more policy subjects in urban planning. Therefore, you can approach urban planning from the policy point of view, from the drawing point of view, from the numbers in terms of returns, GDP point of view. So there's many realms of urban planning.
Right. So what advice would you give students who want to get into this profession of urban planning?
Right. It's an interesting field. See, we are currently about, if I'm not mistaken, 7.5 or close to 8 billion of us on this planet, right? 20 years back when we graduated from college, it was about six and a half. So with the rate at which human population is expanding, you can just imagine the amount of infrastructure of by governments in cities and towns that need to be planned to accommodate such a large growing population. The other trend is also a lot of urbanization, which is a lot of the rural population is going towards urban centers because people just want more opportunities, right? When we gained independence 60, 70 years back, then the vast majority of India was rural. Now the vast majority of India is urban, right? That shift has caused a lot of pressure on urban areas, and you just need a lot of urban planning um, to reconcile and make a better quality of life for people. So you will always have new cities to be planned, city growth, city redensification, right? Improving the quality of life of cities within the people, right? To decongest the cities and to improve transportation infrastructure. So urban planning looks at various realms, and I think there's a lot of opportunity in India and internationally.
Yeah, even I agree with you because I think there's a urgent need for urban planning because most rural parts of the world are getting urbanized into bigger metropolitan cities.
Yeah.
So, what skills do you think students need to be successful urban planners?
Right. I think in the Indian context, it's a good idea to do architecture, right? Not all architecture students become architect, right? I would expect less than half of them actually go on to practice architecture. As in engineering, if you look at all our engineering students, less than half are actually in core engineering fields. Probably a quarter of them go into MBA and business management. I think it's good to approach urban planning from the architecture point of view, right? But the couple of other realms that's very important and will actually keep you at an advantage than just to do architecture is studying economics and finance. Ultimately, what governs the growth of any urban center is the economics, right? Industry, economics, and that determines where people are moving, right? And then that determines your urban planning. So whenever we are doing a very large scale urban planning project, the person to advise us first is the economist, and then the urban planners come in and do their thing about policy as well as the planning, right? So we work very closely with the economists. So economics is another path into urban planning, and therefore you are at the top end of starting to look at cities on the city growth and development.
Right. So thank you so much for explaining the concept of urban planning, and I wish you all the very best.
Right. Thank you, Sean. All the best to all of you.